My name is Riley Eager. I'm the head of customer success here at Paperless Parts. This is episode 4 of our webinar series. And today, last time we touched about, in episode 1 of our 3-part series, we touched about P3L. We kind of looked at it. We went through the understanding the basics of it. But today, after I got a lot of feedback from that video, and I talked to quite a few people, and I'm seeing a couple people jump in here now that I spoke with, I'm going to put a lot more emphasis on how to create a process and how to create an operation using the P3L that we have in our resources page. So 2 videos ago, I talked about what is a process and what is an operation, but I didn't really dive into how you actually get the P3L, that pricing language, and how you get going with it. Where do you start? Like what variables should I look at? Which one should I change? And how do I produce a price if I don't feel like calling one of your CSMs, your customer success managers here at Paperless? We encourage you guys to always give us a call if you ever have any questions. But if you want to kind of dive in on your own, I wanted to show pretty much everybody where you can get in the resources page. We have a lot of people here working super hard on just sort of taking their thoughts of the platform and the theories that we built everything around, conveying it, putting it in text, putting pictures, putting sort of how-tos, and then we're putting that in our resources page right in the application. So again, today, high level, we're going to copy and paste some things from the resources page, create a bunch of different operations, talk a little bit about the pricing inputs that are in each one, put them inside of a process, draft a quote with it, and then that way you guys can always refer back to this video and this webinar series if you ever want to go create a process. So this won't be specific to CNC machining process. That's the one that I'm going to create, mostly because we have a sheet metal and a wire EM process already in here. But we're going to create a CNC machining process. We're going to create about 4 or 5 different ops, including some external service ops, such as finish, heat treatment, anodizing, things like that. And then we're going to bundle that all together. We're going to add a couple materials to the process. We're going to draft a quote with it. We're going to get going. So to start, I just want to make sure everybody's good. I've gotten some thumbs up in the comment section already. All right, nice. So we're in the Paperless Parts platform. For those of you that are either in the onboarding phase or in the customer success phase or just trying to learn a little bit more about our platform, this is one of the tabs we have on this left side. So right now we're in the processes tab. We can create a new process. We can go back and forth between process and operations. And as well as we can have our resources tab down here. So there's 2 ways you can access resources within our platform. If you have just a quick thing that you want to look up, you can come up to our answers tab and you can start searching. So if you wanted to look for things like P3L, since that's what we're going to be talking about, you can type in P3L and you're going to see all sorts of different help docs about the words P3L and where they come up within these documents. And if you're related to any of them, you're more than welcome to jump in and just start checking them out. So the other place that you can find resources is the resources tab right in the platform. So you can go ahead and click that and you're actually brought to a whole separate, what we call help.paperlessparts.com. So this is where we are hosting all of our different documents, all of our thoughts about the platform itself. We have some troubleshooting things in here, things about data security, process interrogation. So what happens deep down inside the code to spit out certain numbers, as well as our previous webinar series. And then our product updates. So we release product updates quite a bit. We always make sure you guys can come back in here and check them out. So today we're going to be creating a CNC machining process with a couple different ops. So the first step in the processes page is you're going to come in and you're going to create that process. So we're going to give it a name. So this one's going to be called CNC machining. There's 2 different processes you can pick from, generic and CNC. I know a lot of this may have been covered about 2 episodes ago, so I apologize if I'm being a little bit repetitive, but I just want to make sure that that full thought from start to finish is something that we can cover. So now that we have the CNC process made, we have a bunch of things that we can add to it. Under the assumption that your profile may not have the necessary operations to start creating this, I'm going to show you guys how to do it from scratch. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to come into our resources tab here. And then we're going to come into pricing language, P3L. So we have a series of different documents about all sorts of different processes that we offer. Since I was going to be creating a CNC machining process, I'm going to come into our 3-axis milling. Now, I'm not going to regurgitate everything that I have in here. I hope that you guys can dive in yourself, get a little more in depth with about what it is these variables mean. Come in here and just give a good overview. So we wrote all these help docs, super straightforward, super easy to understand, a nice reading level. It's not a crazy long book. It's just a couple pages you can come through just to help better understand the power of the platform that you're either looking at or that you're using today. So one of the examples that we can grab for CNC mill or for CNC machining is the actual milling operation itself. So if you rewind a couple or 2 episodes ago, we talked about operations and how they're the necessary steps needed to produce the part that you want to quote. So what this is, and this step is the actual machining step, that milling operation. So what are we going to do? Or we can copy the top one or the bottom one. So there's a few different versions of this. For the sake of this example, I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to highlight the top one. I'm going to head back into paperless. And we're going to create that milling operation. So there's already a bunch of sample ones in here. But for the sake of this, I'm going to go through and create one from scratch. So this one is going to be called milling number 1. We don't need to assign it a machine. It's not really related to this specific operation. If this was an additive focused process, we would want to grab a machine just because there's a lot of different orientations involved for additive. So we have milling number 1 created. We have 4 different things we can pick from. So again, if you watched episode, I think it was 2, you'll know how to change all these different units. But what we're going to be doing here is we copied this milling operation from the milling dash or 3-axis milling process in the resources tab. We're going to open up the P3L editor and we're just going to drop it right in. So we have 11 lines of code here. And what this is able to do is going to create a few different pricing inputs that are going to be involved in our milling operation. So we have our standard runtime and setup time. We have a machine rate, and we also have a setup rate. So some really simple to use variables for this specific milling operation. So they're going to come in with some default values. You're more than welcome to come in here and you can zero them out or you can change them. So I'm going to change this to 75. I'm going to change my setup rate to 85. So I have $75 machine rate and $85 setup rate. Now, like I had mentioned, there's a couple different versions of this that you can copy and paste. Some of them have different pricing inputs than others, but they always have an explanation underneath for what they are. And if you ever have any questions, you can always just live chat us right down here and let us know, and we're happy to answer them for you. So now that we have this milling number 1 operation created, that's like probably the first and foremost thing that you would think of when you're creating a part, is that I actually need to remove that metal. I need to get rid of it and get to that shape. But there's a lot of other things that you think about when you're creating or when you're actually taking those necessary steps. And what we have here is a few other ways that you can create those. So the next step, or really the first step, is you need that material itself. So besides the actual machining, you want to account for the cost of material. So if you're, again, we're back in the resources page, we're in the pricing language, we're in P3L Work Center examples now. So before we were in the 3-axis milling because that's the operation we were going to create. Now we're going to create a material operation. So general Work Center examples are slightly unique because they're mirroring the ERP style look. They definitely have way more power and way more customizability than an ERP system. But for those of you that are either in E2, you're in JobBoss, maybe you're in RealTrack, maybe you're in Keyed In Solutions, there's a couple different ERPs out there, but we took a good glance at all of them and we wanted to create a really sort of familiar mindset and familiar look that those ERPs have. So we have our general Work Center operation. This one will be used for things like admin, accounting for admin costs, accounting for shipping or an inspection cost. We have a general outside service operation, so copy and paste this to account for things like finish or heat treatment or threading if you're going to use that as an outside service. And then last but not least is just a general material operation. So how do we want to calculate material costs? Maybe we can do it in a way that you don't have to, or you no longer have to get outside RFQs if you can get it dialed in just enough. So we're going to use what we call our general material operation, and it's using a cost per pound calculation. There's 2 different versions. There's rectangular stock, and then there's cylindrical stock. So this would be more for a lathe process if you're going to be looking at rods instead of rectangular bars. But we're going to copy in this one. So this is our rectangular stock cost per pound calculation. Oh, man, my mouse is all over the place today. All right, so scroll down. We got it all highlighted. Copy. We're going to come in here. We're going to create a material operation. So material, and I'm going to call it rectangular. Perfect. Don't need to associate it with a machine. It's created. The first thing you want to do is change that category from operation to material so our system knows that this is a distinct material operation. And then we're just going to drop in that code that we just copied from the resources page. So if everyone's ever curious about what's going on inside these operations, we do give a little bit of text, a little explanation. You can kind of piece your way through it. It's only 35 lines with a couple spaces, so I'd probably say more like 20 lines of code. This one is a little bit more robust. There's a little more inputs to it, not so much just simple like 3 input or maybe a 2 input like we looked at an episode ago, but it definitely gets the job done, and we've had a lot of good feedback about it. All right. Ooh. There we go. All right. I had a quick little thing in there. So what we're looking at here is 4 different pricing inputs. This one, cost per pound, is automatically going to be calculated from the material that's being used for that quote. So material buffer, if you want to put a buffer around the part to sort of give yourself a little bit of room, as well as maybe make up for some possible loss, you can come in here and input a buffer. So I'm going to do 0.25, roughly 1/4 inch. We're automatically going to be able to calculate the pounds per part if you use a 3D model. And then we're also going to be able to automatically calculate the material unit cost for that specific part. So we've made a material rectangular op. We've copied that in right from the P3L Work Center examples doc in the resources page. And the next operation that we're going to start thinking about would be either an admin op, so either an admin or a programming. We've had a lot of mixed feedback about how people break those out, but for the sake of this example, I'm going to create one called, well, let's do both. How about that? Admin dash programming, so a little bit of both. Inside of admin dash programming, we're going to drop another generic work center in there, but it's not going to involve any sort of interrogation. So it's not going to look at the geometry of the part quite yet. We could definitely take that approach if people wanted to, but for the sake of just kind of trying to keep it simple, we're going to use just a general work center operation. So general work center operations have all sorts of good inputs in them. They're able to cover a lot of the same processes that people think about / what they use in their ERP system. So again, we're in the P3L Work Center examples. We're going to copy the first one for any sort of general operation that you need. This is always a good go-to. So we're going to drop that in here. We have some verbiage about what we have going on. Notice we don't have any like analyze CNC mill 3 or analyze lathe or analyze sheet metal up top, because we're not going to use the geometry of the 3D part quite yet. So definitely something that you could use if you're a little more advanced user. But for the sake of this, we're going to keep it nice and simple. So we're always going to check, save, and then we're going to look at these inputs. So for those of you that are heavily involved in ERP systems, you're definitely going to kind of have a step back wow moment here, because it looks very, very similar to what you guys see. But the really cool part is in an ERP system, you don't get access to this stuff. So that's a unique thing in paperless. So for this specific operation, admin and programming, we're going to keep it fairly generic. We're going to do a setup time. We'll do less than that. We'll do $55. Run labor cost of $55. This is essentially the same. If you do the same for both, it's the same concept of a shop rate. So if you want to put in a machine rate, so it's a cost per hour to keep the machine occupied. So the actual physical machine takes up a certain square footage in your shop. There's actually a cost associated with that machine if it's not being occupied versus if it is being occupied. So if you have an hourly rate for your machine, there's definitely something you can include here, and it's just factored into that runtime. It's factored into that run labor rate. Similar variables in ERPs such as efficiency and percentage attended, I'm going to have the default for both of these stay at 100%, not really something that you need to play with for this specific operation. So I'm going to do my setup time on this to be a default 60 minutes. So it's always going to come out with 60 minutes. And if let's say the admin or the programming time for that specific part, it needs to be maybe 2 hours or 3 hours. I can edit that when I'm looking at the part on the quote, but I always want to just have an hour. That's a good general blanket, so around $55. Great. So the next one, if we kind of go through the steps here, we have our material that we created, we had our admin and program that we've created, we've had our actual milling operation that we've created. Next, we're going to do pretty much the same operation that we just used, but for a Q&A step. So we're going to come down here. We're going to call it just general QA. You probably already have one in there, so we're going to call it QA number 1. And we're going to drop in that same work center example because this one's super versatile. You can use it for pretty much anything. It's simple, it's easy to understand, and it gets you going pretty fast. So the best part about it is you can always come in here if you want to create an operation. Maybe it's a post machining step of some sort, deburring, or maybe it's something that's a little bit more complex. But if you ever just want to create an operation to play around with, definitely a good starting point. So we're going to copy this one, come in here, paste it, quick check, save. And we got QA number 1. So we're going to say default setup time for this is going to be, we'll say ½ hour. So 0.5. I realized on the other one I put 60, so I should probably go change that to 1 hour. We're going to have a default runtime in hours. So we'll do, let's do about 1 minute per part. Let's do 2 minutes per part. So that's going to take the runtime of about 2 minutes times the quantity. So think about that. You're grabbing each individual part. Maybe you're looking at it. If it's a quick inspection, it's just a quick glance, and then it goes on. But if it's more in depth, and you have to do some programming involved for a CMM machine or a similar process, you may bump this runtime up per part to maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and then the programming for the actual setup time could be anywhere in the hours. So setup labor rate, we're just going to do another $50, and then the run labor rate, we're going to do another $50. So keep it simple. Of course, you can put different ones there if you want. Percentage attended, efficiency, machine rate, number of people that are on the job, all one. So super easy. So QA number 1 is all set. So we can start building out this process just to give you guys a good visual representation. So far, the first one I always like to add is the material operation. So we have material rectangular for this specific process. After that, we're going to go to our admin-programming operation that we created. Then we have a milling number 2 op, or excuse me, a milling number 1 op that we created as well. And then we just created a QA number 1. So we have QA that we're going to add. And then we're going to go and create a shipping. So shipping is super easy. Come down here, we're going to create an operation called shipping. And you guys guessed it, we're going to use that same one again. So super, super, super versatile work center to use. And if people are saying, hey, Riley, that's too simple. Like, I want one that's more complex. I want one that uses geometry. I want one that scales with quantity breaks plus or minus 10 quantity. It uses one rate. Over 10 and 25, it uses another rate. All things that are super, super possible because it is still Python. So that functionality, those if and else functions are all possible, as well as using a series of different 1s and 0s to call out different features. All that stuff can definitely be done. And sneak peek, hint, hint, is something we're going to be covering in the next part 3 of the webinar series. So maybe with this video under your belt, you'll be able to create some processes and ops, get some ideas, and then come to the next webinar and just crush me with questions, and I'll be able to bring in the right people to answer them. So we have shipping done here, shipping prep in hours. We're going to, again, just do a ½ hour runtime per part. We did 2 minutes for that one, so I'll do that same thing. So 0.034, so around 2 minutes of shipping prep per part. We're going to do these rates just a little bit lower, though. All right, that one looks good. Jump back into our process, see what things are looking like. We can add shipping to this now. So come up here, start typing shipping. And then let's see. So I think admin programming is the one that I had to change. Yeah, so I'm just going to change this to 1 hour instead of 60 hours. I was thinking in minutes there, but you can definitely change the display time if you need. That's what the build a quote will actually look like. So it'll display 60 minutes, but in this case, it was all the inputs are all done in hours. All right, so let's go check out this process. What are we looking at so far? So we don't have any materials yet. We'll get to those. We have our material operation that's going to reference the materials that we add. We have our admin/programming operation. We have our milling operation, so the actual physical creation of the part. We have our QA, because we're going to be looking at the parts afterwards. We have our shipping step, and then the next thing we need to do is add finishes. So finishes aren't as simple as just like write it in. It's an operation that can be specifically designated as a finish, and we do that because people get super, super in depth with them, because a lot of you know, one of the most cumbersome parts of drafting a quote is waiting for outside services. So whether that's materials or it's different finish operations that you need done, anodizing, plating of any sort, powder coating, heat treating, that can all be essentially mathematically figured out in P3L if you really want to dig in. So we have certain users that sat down with their finish guys and they high level came up with some P3L that would look at the part and then it would essentially come up with a cost. So he wouldn't have to receive RFQs from his finish guy anymore unless it exceeded a certain sort of threshold. So the other way we can do it, a little more simpler way, is creating a operation that has a lot charge that you can get from your finisher. It's got a per piece price in case it exceeds the lot charge, as well as an added days and lead time input. So if that finish is picked, it's going to add to the calculated lead time. So what does that look like? How do we create that, Riley? Great question, everybody. So we're going to come in here to operations again. We have a couple of finishes built out already, but I want to do one from scratch. So we're going to call this one, we'll call it anodized purple. That seems like a fun one. I already have one called anodized purple. All right, we'll call it anodized purple number 1. All right, so we're going to jump in here. We don't have a category for finishes, so it's still just a generic operation, and we're going to edit the pricing formula. But Riley, where are we going to get that from? Another great question, everybody. We're going to come in here. So we're in the Work Center examples. Instead of using the top one, because that one wouldn't really make sense for this situation to have a setup and runtime for an outside service. So we're going to scroll our way all the way below general material operation. Where is it? I've got it. Outside service. There it is. Skipped right over it. So general outside service operation looks at 3 distinct variables, like I mentioned, the lot charge or per piece price, as well as the days added lead time. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to copy out this exact P3L. I'm going to drop it into my brand new finish operation. So this one's going to be pretty straightforward. Lot charge, per piece price, days added lead time. So if the extended price, which is the part dot quantity, so the number of requested quantity times the piece price is less than the lot charge, we're going to use the lot charge. If it's not, then we're going to use the extended price, otherwise known as the piece price times the quantity. If this specific operation can generally add a couple days to your lead time, it's something that you want to include. So I'm going to say for this one, we're going to do a lot charge of $50. We're going to do a per piece price of $3.50 and a days added lead time of 3 days. Because if this finish operation is picked, I want to make sure that I buy myself a little bit of time because I know I have to get the parts out to my guy down the street. He's got to anodize them and I got to bring them back. All right, so we have our finish operation created. So we're going to come back into processes, CNC machining. We have all of our operations, known as all of our steps necessary, and they have been created. So all the steps have been created to machine a part. If I were to get an RFQ right now, and now I want to make sure I have an available finish to pick from. So we have anodized purple number 1. We're going to go ahead and add that. So we have 1 available finish on this specific process. And now we're going to add some materials. So you can come in here. I know we've done this in past ones, so I just want to make sure everybody knows if they're new to the webinar series. Oops, not looking at my keyboard. That would help. 6061. So we'll do T6 just for now. We have a bunch of materials in there. You're more than welcome to add as many as you would want. So if we remember that the material operation was looking at a cost per pound, this is what we were talking about. So we have a box that you can put in the average cost per pound that you as a manufacturer pay for the associated material. So for here, I'm going to come in and I'm going to say $4 per pound. I don't need to add a custom material name. I'm totally okay with this one. And additional lead time, if I want to, I can come in here and say anytime aluminum 6061 is picked, I want to add 2 extra days to my calculated lead time to make sure it accounts for that. So what is my standard lead time that is going to be the base plate for all these operations to add their custom lead times onto? That's where you're going to input here. So on business days, I'm going to say 20 business days standard, 100% yield. All right, look where we are now. We built an entire process with example operations right from our help docs. We've got a material operation, we've got an admin/programming operation, we have the milling op itself, we have a QA, and then we have a shipping operation. We created an available finish. We put in a material, 6061 T6, and then we have a supplier cost of $4 per pound. So next step on this is we can now go draft a quote with it. We can see what it looks like, which is the really, really fun part. So instead of kind of waiting and trying to figure out like whether or not you want to ask to create a process, or if you have a next meeting on the calendar with a CSM or a support rep here at Paperless, more than easy to just come in here and do it yourself. It's our resources page has a lot of really good stuff, so I encourage everyone to come in here and start reading some things and playing around a little bit. So let's dive into the quotes page here. We're going to create a new quote, and we're going to use that process that we just created. So I'm going to put myself in as a customer. So Riley, I'm going to upload a part here. So we'll go to my test parts. I'm going to go to test part number 1-step. And I'm going to pick that process that we just created. So we made CNC machining. We had an available finish called anodized purple 1. And we're going to put in our requested quantities. If, let's say, Riley sent me an RFQ for 1, 5, 25, and 100, instead of drafting a bunch of different ones, I can just input my 4 right here. I'm going to upload my part, maybe take a quick glance at the different financials that we give in. We can scroll over to company and see what's going on here. We can head back. We're now running the geometric interrogation that was inside of a couple of those operations through the P3L that we were looking at. Boom, we got prices, and we have calculated lead time. So remember, we had 20 days standard. We added a couple days within our different operations to get a calculated lead time of 25 days. So everybody knows where these days come from. Everybody knows where these prices come from, but we want to still get another quick look at them. So we're going to open up this, we're going to open up this line item. We can call out some manufacturability warnings just to see a little bit more about the part. You can always click into the part viewer, as well as look at any matching parts. So we scroll through. First operation we see is that material operation that we created. Naming is a little different, right? So it doesn't say material rectangle anymore. It automatically grabs the name of the associated material for this quote. So we can expand it, and we see that we have that $4 per pound. Remember, so that's what we had input. Oops, I'm on a different tab here. That's what we had input right here. So $4 per pound, $4 per pound. Our material buffer of 1/4 inch. This part itself weighs 11.8 pounds. So the material cost for this part is $47.24. $47 for a requested quantity of 1, requested quantity of 5, 25, and 100. We have 2 different online references you can look at. So we have a make quantity of 1, since our yield is 100%, a requested quantity of 1. We can see that for the different material stocks, we were able to see the associated prices. So we can jump to 5, we can jump to 25, we can jump all the way to 100. So these aren't being used automatically. They're actually just references that we use, or that we work with McMaster-Carr and Online Metals to always keep up to date, so people can come in here, quickly see these, and then reference them. So we have a good understanding of how these material prices came to be. I can take a quick note. If I don't want to, I can hit save. We're going to keep them. So admin and programming, we had our default of 1 hour, and then we had the associated rates with that. So our setup and labor rate, we don't have a runtime for this because there's not really one that needs to be associated per part for this. It's more so just a one-time upfront sort of allotted amount of time that needs to be accounted for. So that's the 60 minutes at $55 an hour. Remember, if I was going to say that this part's actually way harder to program, I'm going to spend 2 hours doing it. I can up that to 120 minutes times the $55, and our rates are going to, or our cost is going to change across all the quantities. We have the actual milling operation itself. So milling number 1, we have the setup time. So we call out a distinct number of setups, and then we call out a calculated runtime based off of an algorithm or a machine learning algorithm that we came up with. So we have those associated rates across. We have a time per setup. We have machine rate setup, or we have, setup time, machine rate, and setup rate. So all those are associated with our requested quantities. We have our QA, so 30 minutes of setup time, roughly 2 minutes of runtime per part. So by putting in a runtime, you're going to see that number scale across the quantities. If you want to say that the runtime per part is actually going to be more like 15 minutes, because you got to spend a good amount of time looking at each individual part. And the setup time for QA is not going to be 30 minutes. Really, it's going to be more like 120 minutes, so almost 2 hours of setup time. So you can, again, start to see that scale across the different quantities. Because you're at 100, you're going to be spending a pretty solid amount of time really looking at those parts, programming different inspection programs. So last but not least, amongst the operations that don't include the finish op, which is labeled here, we have shipping, and we set around 30 minutes of setup time for shipping. The only thing that's a little bit different is we have a less of a rate that we input because it may not be a super expensive person in the office. So we always want to make sure that we are accounting for the rates correctly across everybody that touches this specific operation. So 30 minutes of setup time, about 2 minutes per part. Let's say the parts were easier to pack than we expected. We can knock that down to 1 minute. We can see the associated requested dollar amounts change. And then last but not least, we have the finish operation. So we have our lot charge of $150, piece price of $350, and added lead time of 3 days. So added lead time of 3 days plus our added lead time of 2 days gives us our calculated lead time of 25 days, is what we saw earlier, because we have our standard for this process, which is 20 days. So we have our lot charge, piece price, and lead time. You can see that we don't exceed the lot charge for the first 3 requested quantities. So $350 times 25 doesn't exceed $150, but $3.50 times 100 exceeds the lot charge, so that the piece price takes over. It doesn't add to the lot charge, but it just takes over. So that's why we see $350 here. If we wanted to add another operation as we're doing this, it's super easy to do that as well. If you said, Riley, I want to add, another, let's say I want to add another milling operation, for example. You can come in here, you can add the milling op again. You could put it somewhere else. So let's say you're going to mill it, you're going to look at it, and then you're going to have to mill it again. Again, I don't know if that's standard practice for you or if for anybody, but for the sake of the example, I just wanted to drop that in there. And then again, you can also delete it if you didn't want to use it at all. So down to the pricing table, we have our yield percentages. Again, it's super easy to say that my yield percentage for this part is actually only going to be 98%. So it's going to adjust my requested quantity, or it's going to adjust my make quantity to make up for the fact that I have to produce up to 3 more parts at a requested quantity of 100. We're just really trying to give you a little bit of room on that scrap rate. So we have our lead time, we have our price per unit, we have 2 different variables that we use to mark up the quote itself. I'm going to not do markup on this one, for example, and we're going to see that markup go away. So that is creating a process from the resources page, drafting a quote with it. Ideally, you could come in here now, hit finalize, and get this quote out to your customer. So Riley could get his digital quote, super easy to look at. You can come in here and hit preview just to see what's going on. He's got his 25-day lead time. He's got the part. He can play around with it if he wants, just to get a quick look, and then check out and go from there. So super easy. I encourage everybody to dive into the resources page as we build them out and we get stronger with them. You can really start to do some fun stuff by diving in here, especially if you have a little bit of programming background, you understand Python 3, or just a general shell of Python, how to define variables. Actually, I may even take that back. If you understand Excel and you understand how to define variables and then reference them in a series of different functions, the same ideas are here, and we have an awesome team here to support you. So I see a lot of thumbs up. I've gotten, and I apologize if I haven't answered everyone's questions. I saw some pretty elaborate ones when I had the P3L open. And just for the sake of this example, I wanted to keep it a little more straightforward and a little more simple. So if anybody else has any sort of last questions that I could answer as I'm going through this, I'm more than happy to give you guys a little sneak peek about 2 Wednesdays from now. So I guess not next Wednesday, but the Wednesday after. I'm not sure the date off the top of my head. But 10 a.m. is going to be the part 3 of the webinar series. We're going to go into the P3L, and we're going to have someone from our dev team do a little bit of a manipulation of the P3L, add some if functions, maybe take a look at a laser operation as well as a sheet metal process, because that's where we can do some really, really fun stuff. But again, please follow up with some questions. Shoot me via email, riley@paperlessparts.com. You can call our support phone number. I'm happy to grab a FaceTime or a screen share with anybody to explain or just show them some really fun stuff. I probably want to host more of these webinars more frequently, but I'm sticking to a little bit of a cadence right now. So everybody, again, my name is Riley Eager, Head of Customer Success here at Paperless Parts. Thanks for jumping on with us this Friday, and have a great weekend.